In Ruth chapter 1, we are introduced to the tragic losses of Naomi and Ruth. Both women are stripped of their male relationships and protection. Both women are left with the ancient choices of either selling themselves into slavery, turning to prostitution, or simply dying. Unless they can find a kinsman redeemer, a relative who is willing to take them into his home and restore their social relationships with the community and their inheritance. At the end of chapter 1, Ruth and Naomi have returned to Bethlehem at the barley harvest, a time of rejoicing, a social and agricultural time of security. In chapter 2, hope springs anew, and a romance begins to blossom. We start with verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing, whose name was Boaz. Boaz's name literally means strength is in him. He's described in the Hebrew language as a powerful, valiant, mighty man of great wealth. In verse 2 we read, and Ruth, remember Ruth is a Moabite, Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, let me go to the fields to pick up the leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I may find favor. The word favor here means grace. Grace is often defined as receiving the positive that we do not deserve. Ruth is a foreigner living among her enemies. She says, let me go into someone's field and pick up the leftover grain. This is the act of a poor beggar. And maybe I will find grace. Maybe somebody will treat me better than I deserve. The law of Moses instructed farmers to leave certain leftover grain for the poor, the widows, and even the foreigners who were living among them to come and to gather up, so that these people who had no other source for food or income might have a way to sustain their life. Again, this is an upholding of the law of God. In a time of the judges, a time when people were doing whatever they so desired. So Naomi said to Ruth, go ahead, my daughter. And so Ruth went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. And as it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Now, just then, Boaz arrives from Bethlehem. So, being the owner of the field, he comes to check on the progress of his workers. He arrives and he's greeted by the harvesters. "The Lord Yahweh be with you. The Lord Yahweh bless you." Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, "Whose young woman is that?" Boaz notices Ruth, and he asks, literally, "Whose wife is that?" Boaz wants to know if Ruth is available. We'll see this develop further as the chapter goes on. The foreman replies, "Well, she is the Moabitess, the one who came back from Moab with Naomi." We don't know if the foreman is showing any hostility towards Ruth. He simply states that this woman has returned with Naomi, so she is already been talked about throughout the small town of Bethlehem. And she asked us, this is verse 7, she asked us, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." So Ruth came and she asked to follow along with the other poor and destitute who were working at gathering up anything left behind by the harvesters. And so she went into the field, and notice what the foreman says. "She has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter." So the foreman has noticed that Ruth possesses a hard-working ethic about her, something that has impressed him. And so he shares that compliment with Boaz, the owner. So Boaz then says, Boaz goes to Ruth. And I love this. He says, "My daughter." But the actual Hebrew is, "Hey, the apple of my eye. Listen to me." Boaz is starting to put on the charm. He's starting to flirt with Ruth. He calls her the apple of his eye. And then he says, "Don't go and glean in anyone else's field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along." The word in the Hebrew for follow along is to cling. This is the same word that was used in chapter 1 to describe how Ruth related to Naomi when Naomi wanted to return to Bethlehem from Moab. Ruth clung to Naomi. She followed hard after her mother-in-law. Now Boaz says, "Just as you did with your mother-in-law, cling to my servant girls." So Boaz is trying to not only protect Ruth, he's advancing Ruth in her status with the community from that of a poor, destitute, lonely beggar to one of cared for protection as a servant girl. Boaz then says, I have told the men not to touch you. I'm protecting you from violence, from rudeness, from lewd tricks from my hired hands. Because remember, Ruth is a Moabitess, and historically the women from Moab were quite beautiful. With Ruth being a Moabitess living in Israel, she very well could have fallen victim to improper treatment from the men that she was working around. So Boaz says, basically in modern day language, I've told the men not to sexually harass you. Why does Boaz do this? Is it because he is a relative on Naomi's husband's side? Perhaps. Or is it because he has immediately taken a fancy towards Ruth, calling her the apple of his eye, making sure that she continues to work in his fields and no one else's, elevating her social status and assuring her protection? He then says, whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. Again, this is an upholding of the law of Moses, which instructed the Israelites to care for those, the widows and the poor, who could not care for themselves. Verse 10, at this Ruth bowed down with her face to the ground, and she exclaimed, why have I found such favor? Again, the Hebrew word is grace. Why have I found such grace in your eyes that you have noticed me? The Hebrew word here for notice is respect. That you have shown such respect for me, for I am a foreigner. I expect to be looked down by the men of Israel. I expect to be treated with contempt, rudeness, and lewd tricks. Why have you shown me such respect and such kindness? Well, the reason is that Boaz has fallen head over heels for Ruth at first sight. Boaz replies, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. So Boaz is well informed. He has heard about the tragic losses of both Naomi and Ruth. And he says, I have also heard how you have helped to protect and provide for your mother-in-law ever since the death of your husband. How you left your father and your mother and your homeland and came to live with a people that you did not know before. Boaz is comforting Ruth with his words and with his actions. He says, may the Lord, may Yahweh our God repay you. The word means may God make full restoration for what you have lost. What has Ruth lost? She's lost her husband. She's lost the chance to bear children. She's lost her family's inheritance and her homeland. So he says, may the Lord Yahweh make full restitution to you for what you have done. May he justly reward you. For he is the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. The word here means you have come to trust, and you've come to hope in. You've fled to Yahweh, the Lord God Almighty, for protection. And as you have done so, may the Lord offer such hope and such protection that you seek. He then says, Ruth then says in verse 13, may I continue to find favor. The word is grace. That's 3 times the word grace has appeared in this chapter. May I continue to find grace in your eyes, my Lord. So now she calls Boaz her Lord, which means my master or my owner. Right? Boaz said to her, work alongside my servant girls. All right? He elevates her. Ruth accepts that promotion in her social status. She replies to him in kind. May I continue to find grace in your eyes, my master, my owner, she said, for you have given me comfort. Now here's what I really love. You see, in the original Hebrew language, the romance between Ruth and Boaz is so much more highlighted than it is in our English translations. For the word here, to comfort, literally means you have taken my breath away. Boaz calls Ruth the apple of his eye. Ruth then says to Boaz, you have taken my breath away. So you can see how this budding romance is developing here as the story progresses. She says, you have taken my breath away, and you have spoken kind words to me, your servant. Though I do not have the standing of one of your servant girls, you still treated me as such. So then she apparently continues to work, because in verse 14 it says, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here. The word here, come over here, is another unique Hebrew word. The word literally could mean approach me. The word is also used as an invitation for sexual intercourse. Things are starting to get a bit steamy between Boaz and Ruth. So Boaz says, come on over here, with the underlying implication that he wants more than Ruth to come sit next to him. He says, have some bread and dip it into the wine vinegar. Now, wine vinegar in those days was used to nourish the body and refresh and strengthen the spirit. Today, we might call it Gatorade. He says, come over here, have some bread, have some Gatorade, refresh your spirit, while we get to know one another a bit more. So Ruth comes and she sits down with the harvesters. The word to sit can also mean to be married. So she comes